You all know the indie horror genre by now. It's a genre full of indie horror games that is now primarily dominated by mascot horror. Thanks to the success of Five Nights at Freddy's, this genre saw new life. While it did bring a lot of good, it also brought a lot of bad and consequences. Games like Bendy and the Ink Machine, Baldi's Basics, Hello Neighbor, and especially Poppy Playtime all started coming in. Most of these games would often have huge controversy surrounding them, and have been endlessly criticized for lacking passion within the games. Poppy Playtime has always been the biggest example for me due to how at least the first chapter of the game was initially a 30-minute tech demo for $5, on top of that with ridiculous merch, a movie deal, and just all of that literally before the release of the second chapter. Even worse was the controversy surrounding the game that was going on, like the NFTs and the bullying of Eckroaster. In terms of the game itself, it was like I already said, a 30-minute tech demo that had the bare minimum fetch quests and lackluster gameplay everywhere else that felt so copied from games of before, like Bendy. Characters like Huggy Wuggy popularized a style of character design in these newer games that felt like they were only just designed the way they were to be as marketable to people as possible, which was a huge contrast to games like FNAF, where the character designs were made to serve a purpose within the game. Hell, even Bendy's character designs were meant to serve a purpose within its game. For a long time, I've always considered at least Chapter 1 of Poppy Playtime to be the worst horror game I've ever played in my entire life, not even just indie horror. This game has always been to me the prime example of what is wrong with the modern state of indie horror. However, on January 6, 2023, a certain game got released. And this game now has the title that I once gave Poppy Chapter 1 as the worst horror game of all time, and the example of the current indie horror genre's problems. That game being... This game is just outright dog shit. It sucks. As a game, it's too short for what it is, the minimum runtime being 20 to 30 minutes. The gameplay is extremely bare bones and lackluster, and it lacks any tension or suspense throughout it, at least any that's well executed. The game consists of mind-numbing fetch quests that are completely tedious. The Oplia bird chase near the end of the game is so lame and so uneventful. Terrible jump scare too. Unironically enough, the only part about the game I semi-enjoyed was the Opala bird falling after the chase being over, and that was only because the sound it makes is so stupid that it's funny. The visuals are nothing to write home about either, the character designs for the most part are just blobs and are completely uninspired, the game lacks a good soundtrack or audio, also the namesake of this game, BanBan, doesn't physically show up. This game's cover art and everything displays Jumbo Josh, who you ain't gonna believe this, isn't even the main antagonist of the game. It's the Opula bird. Jumbo Josh only shows up at the end of the game. This is all so fucking stupid. However though, with all of this, I'm pretty sure you can start to see where this is all going. Garten of BanBan is quite simply a shameless ripoff of Poppy Playtime. It's got literally everything. A character design only made for recognition and not to serve as a genuinely frightening horror mascot, gameplay full of fetch quests, a chase with the enemy of the game as the climax, a similar visual style, the short runtime. It's all so similar. There is even a part where the Oplia bird looks at the player from a far distance in the hallway and goes away as soon as you get close to it, which is very similar to how when you go through a hallway in the beginning of Poppy Playtime Chapter 1, Huggy Wuggy's hand is there and goes away when the player gets close. It's the exact damn same, just a hand instead of a head. And if we're gonna get even more specific and technical, this game has a gameplay gimmick. What do I mean by this? I'm referring to the drone. This is literally similar to how Poppy Playtime has the grab pack. It's a fucking gameplay gimmick. Player uses an item they get from the beginning of the game to basically get around most areas of the game, and a lot of the game's fetch quests and puzzles require this item to progress. It's a formula at this point. And I have not gotten to, by far, the worst part about this game, and the biggest point to why this game is a complete ripoff of Poppy Playtime. And I saved this for last because it is by far my biggest reason and point as to why I personally believe that the Garten of BanBan is exactly what is wrong with the modern state of the indie horror genre. On the main menu of the game, there is a fucking merch button. That already is a red flag. And when you go to it, I kid you not, almost all of this merchandise is overpriced as hell. $50 fucking dollars for a sweatshirt of a shittily drawn Jumbo Josh in the corner of the sweatshirt. Same for the Opila bird one. This whole merch situation is the living proof for the fact that the Garten of BanBan was only made for clout, attention, recognition, for a buck, and nothing else. It wasn't made out of passion or love or anything heartfelt like that. When this game was being made, it was being made to sell merch. It was made to appease overreacting and clickbait YouTubers, and quite frankly, that is unfortunately where the indie horror genre is at right now. Back when the first Five Nights at Freddy's came out, you can tell that Scott Cawthon, regardless what you think of him now, put passion and effort and work into making his game of quality. He gave a shit. He cared. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy are iconic characters for a reason. They weren't made for merch. They were made to be terrifying characters for a horror game. As much as people give shit to Bendy now, Bendy, Boris, Alice Angel, and all of those characters are iconic too, because they were made with a vision that didn't involve money tactics or merch or NFTs or any of that bullshit. Baldi's iconic too for the same reason. Even Hello Neighbor, despite what it became, the neighbor became a memorable character for people because of how he was handled in the earliest versions of his game. He served as a stereotypical creepy neighbor. Sure, Huggy Wuggy can be considered an icon now too, but that's because he was made to be that. He was made to be clickbait material. He was made to be seen as eye candy for kids when they're at a store and they see plushies of him and want to buy him. And I see the cast of Garten of BanBan going down a similar path, and I expect that because that's his purpose. And at that point, why even bother supporting these games? As much as there are people criticizing this game right now for the right reasons, there are some people genuinely defending this game, trying to claim it's another good horror game. No, it's not. I can understand why people like a game like Security Breach, since at least that tried to be a game, has honestly a very wholesome development team, and is part of a franchise that does have quality games under its belt. This game though? No. I don't see the support in it. And the worst part is I don't see this shit ever stopping. There's always going to be a game like this that at least some people will like because they're either children or they're YouTubers that need more horror games to play and scream at, regardless of its quality. And that's because the motivations and tactics in regards to how this game was made, I hate to admit it, sadly works. And all of this is exactly why Garten of BanBan is everything wrong with today's indie horror.